Today we're learning chapter 25 in Hechaltzu from the Rashbatz, but I want to just go over the Kitzur from the chapter 24. Chochma Bina Yecholim Liyeh Zeh B'lei Zeh. The Rebbe Rashbatz taught us in chapter 24 that Chochma and Bina, creativity and amplification and development, Bina, understanding, all that, have a different source in the Nefesh. They come from two different places, and therefore, since they come from two different places, they can't exist one without the other. Because in truth, they do exist. Not just they do exist in the Nefesh as a separate entity from the other. Nevertheless, he says, Kol echad, moker miyuchad, each one has a separate source, and he brings the 13 attributes, mazel, the mazel of Notzar and a mazel of Inaki. Chaim Zev, we say, Hashem, Kelech Hapayim, Erech Hapayim, Rav Chesed ve'emes, Noitzer Chesed, La'alofim, Noitzer Oven v'Fesha v'Chato v'Nakei. Noitzer Chesed is the Chochma, associated with Chochma. V'Nakei is associated with Bina. He explained it in the chapter before, I don't want to go into it now. But the point he shows is that clearly both Chochma and Bina have a different source in the Nefesh. Chochma Bina u'mekayreim hofchim zeh mizeh. Nevertheless, but they have a source, but they're opposite each other. Chochma's creativity and Bina's development. And we discussed that too, how someone who's strong and can create can't develop, and someone who can develop can't create. It's very unusual that you have both. Nevertheless, here's the nevertheless. They do find cooperation, and like I wrote on the title of one of the clips, the post to the shir, opposites can attract. People say, I can't get married to my opposite. Yes, you can. You just need to know how to navigate. Chochma and Bina are opposites. But if Chochma and Bina have humility, and that comes because there's something greater than Chochma and Bina that illuminates them, then they can live in peace. And the story, briefly, I've told you this, but I have to say it again because it makes the point. The Chassid at Tzemach Tzedek, Reb Shmuel Batzalel, known as the Rashbatz, big Chassid, a lot written about him in Chabad literature, is davening after his marriage. And he's davening with his talis over his head. He's davening for hours. His wife comes in and pulls the talis off and says, Shmuel Batzalel, come home already. His good friend, Reb Shmuel Ber Barisever, another great chassid at Tzemach Tzedek, is also davening and notices that. And she nudges and schleps him and bothers him, he says, and she leaves, he says to him, Shmuel Batzalel, your marriage is a mekach tois, a mistake. And halachically, a mekach tois is not a marriage. Give her a divorce. If she doesn't appreciate you davening bariches, then you or her or both, you made a mistake in who you took. You took a woman, fine woman, but she doesn't like you davening bariches on Shabbos till 1, 2, 3 in the afternoon. So he said to her, you're right, I would give her a divorce. But what should I do that the Rebbe that Tzemach Tzedek officiated and his bracha will be in vain? Mekadosh Yisrael, he made a bracha, he gave me chuppah and kedushin. And it's a very powerful story. Very powerful. There's something greater than logic. Logically, I deserve to divorce you. It was a mistake. But there's a Rebbe, there's a God, there's a Likus, there's divinity, it's greater. If he sanctions it, then the feeling of this chassid, others don't have this feeling because they get divorced, obviously. Chassidim who get divorced. But his feeling was, there's something greater. And obviously, from heaven, I need to be married to this woman. And she should schlep my talis on Shabbos afternoon. And I should have to put up with it. You know, our kids, grandkids are getting married. If this can be communicated in a subtle way, you know, because it's such an The whole idea of Kiddushin is a godly act. It's not just a physical act. Because if it's just a physical act and a very nice one and a very right one, there could be issues. And yes, the Torah says there's a time for a get, and we know all that. So that's when the Torah, Min HaShamayim, says that it's the right thing to do now, and Rabbanim agree. I had in my community, Marin County, someone, a very good friend, one of the Balabatim, and he wanted a divorce from his wife. He became a Baal Teshuvah with a beard, a Lubavitcher, and she was, schlepping along, and they were always bickering and all that. I said to him, look, this is like a few years after I came. I'm 25, 26 years old. He's already 35, going on 40, or maybe he was 40. And I'm saying, I can't take this responsibility. And in general, I know that the Rebbe Shita, and I'm representing the Lubavitcher Rebbe, is to work it out and stay put. So came back 3 months later, and again 3 months, and he said, I can't. So I said, look, I'm not giving you the green light. You could write to the Rebbe, you're a Chabad Chassid just like I am. The Rebbe is your Rebbe just like he's my Rebbe. Write him a letter, and you're in other words, you're seeking permission. Permission. Ask the Rebbe for guidance. And the Rebbe wrote him back, quoting the Chazal, Goydel Inyan Shalom Bayis, how great Shalom Bayis is, and I'll mention you at the Ohel. That means the Rebbe basically told him, you stay put and don't get divorced. And I'm telling you, there was grounds for divorce. His wife wasn't going to the mikveh. Okay? And the Rebbe, and he told that to the Rebbe. And the Rebbe says, nevertheless, Shalom Bayis is even greater. And guess what? He changed his attitude. And they're married till today. The Oir Ha'ilal Kulono, there's something greater that's beyond what I feel and what I see and what she sees and what she feels. So I'm using this over here because the Rashab and the Kitzer says here, Chochm and Bina Velvo are so opposite. Nevertheless, Miskalim Zebazeh, they can be inclusive, including one or the other. How? A creative mind doesn't see the value of a Bina mind. And a Bina mind doesn't have any understanding of what a creative mind is. Says the Rashab, says Chassidus is wrong. So he doesn't explain it. He did actually mention it briefly in last chapter, but I'm amplifying it. It's because both Chochmah and Bina are 2 points in the Nefesh, but the Nefesh is greater than Chochmah and Bina. And we learned that also earlier in this mind, but the Nefesh is beyond the individual aspect of Chochmah and Bina. So if you tap into Nefesh and you live with soul is analogous to the Rebbe's bracha in the first story with the Rashbatz. And soul is analogous to the second story that Rebbe is saying that Shalom Bayis is even greater than your bickering and she not going to the mikveh and you wanting the divorce. Which again, logically, I'm telling you, I forgot to say that at that point, after 6 months, I was inclined to tell him that he could divorce. She's not going to the mikveh. It's not a month, 2, 3, 6 months. The man's a man. He's a frum man. What do you want him to do? Go and do sins? He's doing a real frum Baal Tshuva. He wants to live like a Yid. And what, you cut him off? It becomes Lubavitcher Rebbe, who's greater, who sees the Eira al Kulona. And that's what a Rebbe is. That's the idea of a Rebbe. There are things we don't see. We don't understand. We're totally not. Anyway, next chapter. He quoted earlier, Chaim Zev, you weren't here, but I hope you'll get a chance to relearn chapter 23 and 24, a quote from Sefer Yetzirah, where it says there, Havein, comprehend, in Chochmah.
And then it says, Hakam, and be creative, bebina in bina. Make up your mind. Say, Havein bebina, v'chakam b'chochma. So based on what we just learned, this saying of Sefer HaYetzirah is correct. Inyan Hiskalos, look inside, please. Habina b'chochma. This is the concept of the inclusion of bina and chochma. Who sheyesh b'chochma, and this is that there is within creativity, within chochma, koyach habina lovila de'asoga v'avona, an aspect, a notion of the power of bina for the creativity to express itself in a comprehensive way. Although overall speaking, creativity means that there is no expansion. It lacks hispashtut, which means expansion. It's only nekuda, it's chokhmah. Nevertheless, it already gives place for there later to be the development of bina. And this is what it means, that it's only a nekuda, chokhmah is only a nekuda. Nevertheless, next page, it will come, it can come to the expansion and comprehension as understood by bina. That is havein b'chokhmah. Now he explains v'chakam bebina. What does that mean? Hu iskalus hachokhmah bebina. Just the opposite. This is the inclusion of chokhmah and bina. Who, and this is hagam shebina him b'pchinas ispashtus b'di b'protim b'di b'hazbeirim. Although generally speaking, what is bina? Many examples, many details. Mikol mokim nevertheless yesh b'koyach hachokhmah lasis meyesh ayin. Is there? What does it mean for bina to use an element of chokhmah? The Rebbe says a beautiful thing here, the Rashab. It is to take an idea that's been developed and to extract it from its development and find its kernel, its germ, its nekuda. In Chabad Hasidic words, to make of yesh ayin. Again, you see the car. Don't look at the car as a fully developed metal car. See it as a heap of metal, and a heap of metal coming from the minerals of the soil, in the soil. In other words, we extract and break down the yesh to ayin. And who does that? Bina does it. So in that case, bina is including within itself an aspect of chokhmah, and that's the meaning of what? Hakam bebina. For who shekol hasoga nichleles achakak b'nekuda echad. This means that the entire comprehension is condensed within one point. V'hi nekudas hatamtzis. Next page. Mikol hasoga. These are important words, Chaver. It's called nekudas hatamtzis. The kuda means point. Hatamtzis means the summary. Nekuda hatamtzis. It's the summation of bina in a flash point, in a geometric point, in one nekuda. V'hu shlilas kol haprotim v'azbeirim. At that, and in that place, it excludes shlilat, from the word shlila. It rejects, it excludes all details and explanations. Kiyim toifes etzem ho'inyin asichli. The nekuda grasps the essential concept here. Who etzem hamuskel b'mukuda echad. This is what we mean, the essential concept in one point. Kamoy shehaven oisei mitoich ribi haprotim v'ezbeirim chulu. After so much development, and so many details, and so many explanations, you sum it up in one nekuda. And if you think about it, there are times when we hit on it. In other words, you study something, you understand something, and you have examples and details and explanations. And then
somehow you come up with a word or like a summation that that expresses that, in all those explanations. That's it. That's what we mean here. Nekudas hatamtzis. And as explained elsewhere, this idea. Zehu mashe biyud yesh boy beis koitzim ve'etzem hayud. On the yud, go to the next page. Actually, go to 2 pages, and you see that beneath the line there's a yud. Again, there's the top of the yud that's called a tag. Then there's the body of the yud, and then there's the end of the yud where it curves to the left. That's called the koitz. So he's talking about the upper and the lower and the body. So what does he say? And this is what we see in the yud, that there's 2 edges, 2 points, and then there's etzem hayud, and then there's the body of the yud. And he explains. The koitz hatachtoin hu habein b'chochma. The lower koitz is bina within chochma. Shehu hanetiya el bina. Chaim Zev, look at the bottom of the yud. Look how it's curved and inclined towards the next letter, which in this case we're talking about the yud k vav k, which is k, hey, the first hey of the Shem Hashem, which is bina. So that's why he says that the koitz, the bottom koitz of the yud, the bottom point, it is the concept of havein b'chochma. It's bina, and it's still chochma. It's part of the yud, but it's the way the yud, the bina is expressed through the yud. Shehu hanetiya la bina. That's why it curves and is inclined towards bina. Over derech klal hu b'chinas keser chochma bina, the chochma. Well, I'm not going to go into that. The hakoitza elyon hu, next page. The hakoitza elyon hu b'chinas keser shebechokma. The higher koitz, he calls it the koitz, but really Moshe tells me, and it's known as the tag. It's a sufrum. When they write, they refer to the top point not as koitz, but as tag. But here it calls it koitz. The top koitz is what we call in Kabbalah the level of keser within chokhmah. V'hi nikuda sichli ham tmunas ois klal, and that is the essential point in exchange for any letter whatsoever. In other words, before you get to the body of the yud, you have the koitz, the top point, that is in exchange for any letter, canal. Ve'etzem hayud. Then comes the body of the yud. We call that the etzem of the yud. The hainu b'chinas haroichev sheboy. This is the expansion, right? Both points, upper and lower, are very thin and little, and also thin. Where do you see some meat and flesh on the yud? It's in the middle. That's the yud. So in Hasidic words, we call that the roichev sheboy, velvel, right? That's the broadness, harchava, roichev, the width. Who b'chinas chochma shebechokma. That's not chochma shebebina or bina shebechochma. That is like the bulk of the yud, which is chochma within chochma. V'hainu nekudas hachochma k'may shebo lechlal seichel golui al kopone b'tzir mugbol. It's the essence of chochma as it expresses itself, at least in a form that's limited, i.e., the body of the yud. And repeats it. The bottom koitz is bina shebechochma. That means it represents the ability of taking the point and bringing it to a place of expansion, with comprehension. So look, the Rebbe in this paragraph that Rashab explained only till here, he explained Habein b'chochma. He didn't explain Hakam bebina. That's what he does now in the parentheses. Look inside. The inyan v'Hakam bebina yesh loimar. In the scenario of the diagram of the Yud, what would be the Hakam bebina? Shua Yud sheba'ois hei beraglo hasmoli sheboy. It's the Yud, not within the letter. It's the Yud within the letter Hey, the next Hey. Its left leg. The Yashleima b'derech efshir. He says possibly the Rashab says shehu nekudas. Next page. Shehu nekudas hatamtzi shebo la'acher ha'erech v'reichiv. This is after you have what's called length and width. In other words, after you develop an idea in full force, you got to take out the summation. Says the Rashab, the summation after the expansion in length and width is expressed in the Hey, and that's the idea of the Bina. That's the idea of what? He calls that Hakam Bebina. Gam Yesh Leimar, we could also say, the Rashab here is obviously in his world of, it's not clear in Chassidus, it looks like, so he's coming up with two scenarios, possibly. Gam Yesh Leimar, possibly we could say, the Tmunas Ois Hey, the Shem Hashem, Tzrichim Lasis Chila Yud, when you write a Hey of the Shem Hashem, you start with a Yud, a Sefer knows this, right? Then you continue drawing from the roof kind of the Hay. Maybe Rashab says that when you start drawing from the Hay downward, that essential drawing downward is a Nekuda. As you drag it down to make the leg of the Hay, that he says would be the equivalent of what we call Hakam Bebina. I don't know more. I don't know about this, and I just don't know. So I just read the words, and we'll have to leave it at that. Kitzur. Habein b'chochma. Netias ha'chochma lovi ba'asoga. What does it mean to comprehend within Chokhmah? This means the inclination of Chokhmah to be understood and comprehended. Hakam bebina is netiyas habina. It is the inclination of bina likolel b'nekudas hatamtzos, to be incorporated in the summation. Beis koitzen. We discussed in this chapter the 2 points. Etzem hayud. And we explained also the bulk of the Yud, which is Keser, Chochma, and Bina, the Chochma. Hakam bebina b'tzudas ha'hei. So this is the end of this chapter, and tomorrow, Mitzvah Hashem, it's a short chapter, but we will learn that tomorrow. Zeit gesund, everyone, and have a great day. Shalom. Bye. Take care.